Hey there. Oop, there we go. The speed of the internet as I try to integrate Instagram into this. Anyway, healing trauma is not a do-it-yourself initially. Okay, let me say that. Just and I've had this conversation quite a few times over the years. I've been accused of being a gatekeeper, so forth and so on. The aspect of healing trauma, it is not a microwave fix. It's just not going to happen in 2 months. And if you've got lifelong trauma, it won't happen even in 2 years. But it's also not a life sentence. That's the important thing to know. It will end. You have to do the work, and there will be a lot of it in some sense. But it's like shadow work, and I've got. I might have to make an image for that because to me, the work that I do at Raise Your Resilience and what future what do I want to call them? Providers, my team will do is basic healing work, which includes the shadow work. Your body doesn't make a distinction between shadow and non shadow. Body doesn't care, heals it all. So, what, and I was thinking this morning as I was kind of answering the question, it reminded me of the times we used to go to Canada and go canoeing. And there's kind of a general rule in some parts of the park. I mean, if you were experienced, you could go pretty much where you wanted to in the park. And after a few years, we earned that right. Voulez-vous la mériter, as we were told during our initiation, which involved us kneeling on the edge of a dock late at night under torchlight. The several men with lever action 30-30s and a jug of I don't know what it was, but it tasted good, and it had some fire to it, and pine branches. So it was a U-shaped dock, water on both sides. And he was giving his spiel, and I think the spiel was just to let us know, just long enough for us to know that the pain is starting to settle into our knees, because it did. And at a certain point in time, he passed the jug to everybody, and then you knew the fun was going to begin, and it did. The guys dipped all the bows, and they come running down the line, whipping our faces, and the other guys with the rifles, bam, 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 shooting up in the air, likely just blanks. But after that, in the shooting, the boss man came by and pushed us all into the water. Voulez-vous la mériter? You have earned the merit of being able to go canoe around this park on your own. We didn't need to have one of his guides with us. Now, okay, well, that was kind of cool, kind of interesting. And one year, we discovered that merit. So I'll tell you the story. And the reason I'm telling you the story is because this happens a lot in do-it-yourself type of thing. We were canoeing along. We were looking for a particular portage, and whoop, there it is. So get out, empty everything out. Whoop, bing, up go the canoes on the, put it back on, put your canoe on your head. The cook gear and all the rest of the stuff's already gone. So the two guys carrying the canoes and the paddles, and off we go into the woods and this trail, and you go up and down and all around, and all of a sudden, everybody else was gone. I don't know where the heck that was. And I was trapped, I dunk, 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 couldn't move between the trees. And I was like, what is going on here? So, and I couldn't put my canoe down. So I just climbed out from underneath it. And there I was hanging up in the trees. And I was just like, how did I get into this situation? And I couldn't see anybody else. And so I yelled out and some names, and back came some yells, and people started moving towards me. And so here comes the two gals, and they said, they looked at me like, how did you do that? And I was just following the trail, and I had gotten off, I think, onto a deer trail. But what we learned later, all things being said and done, we learned later, despite the fact this put us off our map and our path and where we initially were going, that during the voyageur days, when beaver pelts were to be had by the thousands, that and the competition was fierce, because if you got back to Fort Hudson, whatever it was on the Hudson Lake, that famous company that's there that was buying the beaver pelts, what would happen is if you got there first, you got the first money, because eventually, A, they're going to run out of money, and B, you probably have better pelts. That's a possibility. So, and what happened is they developed relationships between the different voyageurs who were going out and doing the killing and the business dudes back at the fort. In any event, the guys who were in the lead, what they would do is they designate a couple of guys, and they'd go hacking into the woods, maybe on an already established deer trail, and they would make it just a little bit wider so it looked like a portage. They'd get back in their canoe and they'd go to what they knew was the portage. Second team that comes along, maybe like us, but in any event, oh, there's the portage. Everybody gets out. All of the gear is emptied out. Off it goes, canoes, and I mean, that's a bit of work, actually. And it's a frame, a mindset, a frame of your own mind about having to climb now, possibly, and so forth and so on. So it's a little bit of a change, and all of a sudden you end up stuck in the middle of nowhere going, what in the H? Before you realize, uh-oh, we just got hoodwinked. They cut this to fool us, because the first team didn't unload. They just cut. So back to the water where you started, load everything up again, get everybody in there, and now you're behind. Well, that's what we got stuck in. Oftentimes, that's what happens to people when they try to heal their trauma on their own. They see what they think is a portage, and lo and behold, it's not. But guess what? They don't have the training to know that that's a fake portage, and they end up lost. Imagine if you didn't have the skills to be in the woods, to set up campsites, to cook a dinner, to do anything else, how to use a compass, how to use the map, so forth and so on, and you're on this portage. Suddenly your canoe is stuck in the trees. You don't know what to do, where to go. Yep, that's what it's like to do it yourself initially. I say that for a reason. All right, so what people do, some have done, and I think some still continue to seek this out. Oh, I'm going to read this. I'm going to look at that. I'm going to watch YouTubes. Sorry. For one thing, reading is good, obviously. Yeah. Obviously, because when I took my training, a lot of this stuff came out of that training. And that training is focused. That's the thing about academics. It's focused. So this is how all of this knowledge that I have here applies to somebody's experiences in a container that I set up that they can come into. I open the door, they come in, close the door. Now we're in a liminal time of change for them. We get to watch what's going on. We don't talk about the past, but then they get to leave. All right. Now, people who are not trained, and I am, because that's where these books all came from, and it was 2 years of clinical experience that was 100% supervised. But if you're engaged with somebody on YouTube and you're not even watching a live event, you have no recourse on stuff that they could tell you is flat out wrong. that is flat out not relative to you or where you're at because they don't have eyes on you. So they cannot witness you either in one of those breakthrough moments or when you get stuck. That's the problem with influencers and counting on, because I'm sorry, a book will give you understanding, but guess what? Trauma is not. Trauma is not a misunderstanding. It's very, 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 and first and foremost, neurophysiological. So all this untrained help, the trauma aware, trauma sensitive, trauma receptive, what are the new word? Oh, trauma informed. By and large, garbage. Trauma informed being the better garbage. I've heard some real junk from people who should know better. But that's the point of training. And that's why the first couple of years you're in that park, the local folks, the rangers, they know everybody who's in the park, and they know what their itinerary is. They know where they came. It's a safety feature. And sure enough, every once in a while they'd fly over. There's so-and-so's group. Yep. Thought we might find them about here. And sometimes they would drop a ranger in the park, and you want to see guys who can canoe fast? Whoa, beaver tail paddles, the whole shot. They'll come flying over to you where you're at, and you know, so they want to know what group you're with, so forth and so on. And once it all checks out, they're happy because they know that everybody is safe and doing well. That's why they do that. And the part of the reason you want somebody who's a trained supervisor watching over you is partly because they're not involved in your life, or they're invested in your life in a little bit, but it's kind of like how do I want to say this? I don't even know what they call the guy, because he's not the firekeeper. When you go into a sweat lodge, a Native American sweat lodge, there's a guy who sits at the door, and that guy's job is to monitor. I mean, he'll run, if depending on the tribe you're with, he'll run the four quarters, and that could take a while. But he also pays attention to the rocks in the fire, and he might call for new rocks. Those are called grandmother and grandfather rocks. The firekeeper's out there. His job is to make sure those rocks are being heated and or that fire keeps going. That's his job. So when the guy inside, a conductor, I don't know what they call him, but he might open the door and call for a rock, and then he'll open the door, the guy will come in, drop a rock, and then the conductor will throw water on it to create more steam. And you have these 4 transformational cycles throughout the entire sweat lodge. And if you need to leave, you need to leave. You just say, all my relations. He'll open the door, which allows you a little bit of light to see where the door is so you can get out. And that could be because the heat is too overwhelming, the emotions are too overwhelming. There's a bit of regulation involved there. And the idea is to step outside of this liminal space. It's a great picture. Same thing with I won't say with any therapeutic session, because sometimes the conductors have little clue. They're probably no better than the people who are inside the crucible trying to heal. In any event, that's why it's one of the reasons why do it yourself does not work initially. I'll get to that. So you have the situation where if you're not vetting those people that are giving you information, you're going to end up with shit. It'll be a garbage time. That'd be like me trying to run a sweat lodge. I'd be the first guy going, gotta get out of here. That's all too common in the therapeutic world, and I'll leave that for a different day. What do I mean by initially? Let me cover that. No, I'll finish this. So when we are trying to do something ourselves, we don't remember that? You have eyes to see something, because I have worked with all kinds of clients and I've watched their bodies long enough to know, oh, that was new. That was a different movement. I'm a somatic trauma therapist. Therefore, I watch their bodies tremor, which is what I teach them how to do. It's an autonomic tremor, and that's what heals the trauma. it discharges it out of the body. And so I'm watching and I can ask later, did you notice? And they say, nope, they didn't. That's why you want a witness. It's like blind spots on a car when you're trying to back up. Somebody's kind, they honk the horn. If you're not paying attention, they hit you. In the analogy, just take it from there. We don't, the funny thing about blind spots is we don't know we don't know we have them. Either in beliefs or sometimes feelings, sometimes our thoughts. If my thoughts and words contradict each other, that's part of the reason we end up in relationships. And one of the things a relationship could have that will make that relationship healthy and grow is the ability to say to somebody, you know, you said just the opposite 4 days ago. Let's talk about that. Because you want to know why that contradiction exists. Contradictions eventually will trip you up. And that's not a very fun or comfortable feeling. And if you're going to grow as a person, hey, how cool is it? It's like having your own therapist with you, even though that's not necessarily the case. So we have these blind spots, and that is a therapist's gift. Now, the bigger, most important thing about why you want to vet your therapist, and I'll explain that in a minute. And okay, so I said you want to vet your therapist and you want to know their history, because as a wounded person, I cannot heal with a nervous system that is just as wounded as mine. That is not going to happen. Just will not happen. And then do it yourself by regulating off of. What is an infant doing with its primary caregiver? It's establishing via ears and eyes and all the rest of its sensate organs. It's establishing a neurophysiological link with its caregiver. That's what that nervous system is doing. That nervous system is setting up the idea that this is safe. And that's how people heal and walk further on into health and growth. Without that, you won't even heal. And that's why the nervous system you're regulating with needs to be, well, I'll use the word better than yours. It needs to be in better condition. It needs to be optimal. I don't know if that's even a better word. And that's the way that is. So when you're vetting a therapist at any time, you want to be able to ask them about their experience with their own trauma. Ask them to define trauma, first off. And if you need there's my email address. You can email me. I can send you the definition, which I created, of course. But you see all that stuff behind me? That's what I based it on. It took me almost a decade to come up with that definition. And I don't know many professionals who would argue with it. But it'll be telling, because I watched a whole workshop, a webinar of 16 different professionals. You know how many of them could define trauma? 0. They all hemmed, they all hawed. The one person said the Greek word means wound. Bravo. And that's hardly enough. If 16 professionals can't define the problem, imagine if that was your car. You took it in and 16 different mechanics said, oh, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that, it's that. You know, I frankly don't know. Where are you going to fix your car? That's where we're at. So when we have the situation of wanting to heal our trauma, ask your trauma, define trauma. Then B, ask them about their experience with their own trauma. And don't expect an encyclopedia. If you get an encyclopedia, they know nothing about boundaries. How they came about understanding that, and more specifically, what did you do to heal your own trauma? They have to know what it is, which is going to mean they know their experience with it and they know how they healed it. And if they say it can't be healed, you're talking to the wrong guy or gal. Leave that place. And then third, or I could say third, but the crucial one is, tell me about your trauma training. The professional trauma training that they went through. And there's two aspects of that. One is all this stuff behind me, academic, all these books. What did you learn? And for a lot of them, that's it. In fact, I could fit it all on less than one shelf of any of these bookshelves. That's trauma informed. There is no clinical experience of working with people one-on-one that is supervised, so that you get to learn what to look for, what to deal with inside a clinical experience with a real human being who's counting on your nervous system to help theirs. Because the work that they're doing is their own. You can't do it for them. They have to do that. Initially, I'll end it here. The wonderful thing about certain tools is that after a year or so, and I base my service on my experience. After a year, my provider said, I think you now have enough grip on this to do this on your own. And it still took 6 more years. But you know what? Those 6 years, I didn't sense it going forward as much because of how healing works, but because once you start feeling life again, you kind of lose sight of all the symptoms, even though some of those are there. So you have to still work on things. Well, cool. And anyway, there's some stuff I could really rabbit hole here. That adventure of a year allows you to then turn it into do it yourself. You've learned how to look. You've learned how to eliminate blind spots. And the thing is, any therapist who's worth their salt will say, you run into a problem, give me a call. It'll be another session, but hey, give them a call. And then you learn something new that you can apply. It's another tool perhaps, or another way to use the same tool. And that's always a good thing. So yeah, it's not a do-it-yourself initially. Hire a professional. It will be worth every penny and every minute when you come to that place of knowing you are symptom-free. And that is very achievable. All right, well, you guys have a good weekend, you guys and gals, you people. Have yourselves a great weekend, what's left of it. And we'll see you again. Bye.